Okay, so two big stories to break down with our panel: the inauguration investigation and a federal judge's order that the Mueller team cough up key documents about Michael Flynn and how he was targeted by the FBI. So let's bring in former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Harry Litman and Fox News contributor, former Utah Congressman Jason Chaffetz. Welcome to you both tonight.
Hi, Sharon.
Thank you.
Okay, so one of the questions now that we have about this Flynn investigation is that he was interviewed in January of 2017. The documents that led to the FBI getting involved and eventually his plea deal have what's called a 302, which is an assessment or a compilation of what he said at the interview. It wasn't written, at least the one that was tagged by the courts, until August of 2017. So that's raising questions about whether there were other 302s, whether this was modified or edited. And the Federalist, writing about this, the headline, "The federal judge overseeing Michael Flynn's sentencing just dropped a major bombshell," says this: the timing of the rewrite shortly after then FBI agent Strzok was removed from special counsel Robert Mueller's team after his anti-Trump text messages came to light raises the possibility that Mueller wanted to scrub the evidence of Strzok's taint. Remember, he was one of the two interviewing Michael Flynn. Having the second agent involved in questioning Flynn draft a new 302 summary would eliminate attacks premised on Strzok's bias against the president. Jason, sounds like the judge is really looking very specifically at this information he wants now.
I like this Judge Sullivan. He's got a good record of doing this. I'm glad he's probing into this. Look, you have very disheartening comments from former Director Comey, taking advantage of a situation of a White House which is days into its infancy, again, doing things outside the norm, not the way they would do it. You have very discredited people based on the Inspector General's report, the fact that Mr. McCabe was fired. You have this report that is coming out months and months. You're supposed to go do these interviews, basically fill out the paperwork in the next day or two so that they have a record in this file. That seems to be out of order. And then the two agents that are there and supposedly investigate him didn't find anything wrong, but now we find out the report comes months later. It does not add up, Shannon. It really does not.
Well, we're going to see, because, of course, this is a judge, as we've explained, who oversaw a trial years ago involving then Senator Stevens, and they ended up investigating the DOJ and FBI scathing report on how they had exculpatory evidence that was withheld. He wants to make sure that doesn't happen in any investigation, including this one. All right, Harry, the reference there to the Jim Comey comments that Jason made, I want to play some of those because he talks about how they essentially got away with something by sending these agents over very quickly to Michael Flynn without a lawyer told him it wasn't necessary. They wanted him relaxed. They didn't warn him about lying. Here's what Comey says about that situation.
And in both of those administrations, there was process. And so if the FBI wanted to send agents into the White House itself to interview a senior official, you would work through the White House counsel, and there'd be discussions and approvals and who would be there. And I thought, it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
Harry, they did. One of them was Peter Strzok, and that wound up with this plea deal now with Michael Flynn having pled guilty to lying.
Yeah, and I do think it's got Judge Sullivan, who, to be fair, is a frequent critic and suspicious of the government. I think it has his antennas up, just as the congressman said. A few points we ought to make here, though. First, it would not be expected in this kind of interview of a department insider that you would give any kind of warnings at all. It's neither required nor customary. And second, the so-called sinister rewriting of the 302, that's also not unusual, to have notes initially and then to revise them down the line. So the suggestion that some of this is either untoward or irregular, I think, is off base. Nevertheless, it's clear that Sullivan is quite worried about some kind of entrapment situation. One final point to raise. He was only charged with the lying point. He could easily have been charged by Mueller with several other offenses, except he immediately began to cooperate, and that affected his whole relationship vis-a-vis
and by the way,
special counsel.
Federal judge can reject the plea deal and make the prosecutors take this to trial. That's quite a possibility.
Yep,
so we'll see when all this information comes in. But I want to ask you both quickly about this. The headline tonight that the inaugural committee is being investigated. It's responding, saying that they did everything fully in compliance with the laws. They filed with the FEC, with the IRS. They have nothing to hide. And they say they don't even know about an investigation. No one's contacted them. I'll get you both to weigh in. Jason, you first.
Well, there needs to be suspicion here. Just because it has the name Trump next to it doesn't mean that gives them carte blanche to just go investigate anything and everything they want. There needs to be some suspicion here and some reason to do that. Now, if that came from something that Mr. Cohen had, that'd be a whole different ballgame. But they should have accounting, and it's the job of the IRS and the Federal Election Commission to oversee that, not necessarily do another criminal probe that leads to nowhere.
Harry, a lot of criminal probes going on and more being promised out of New York as well. This is just the latest.
That's right. That's right. And look, I agree with the congressman. You need some predicate, but they have it here. It's not just Cohen. It's also Rick Gates, who's cooperated. And there is some worry, right? You have Franklin Haney, who gives $1 million and then later asks for favorable treatment for a $5 billion loan. They're just looking at it now, but I don't think it's the sort of thing. It's a lot of missing money, and it makes sense to try to figure out where'd all the money go.
Well, the committee says it's been audited and happy to provide that, so we'll follow the story. In the meantime, Harry and Jason, thank you both very much.
Thanks.